where we talk about this concept of belong. I have a catchphrase which I have used globally, and it simply goes this way: unless you believe you belong, you'll always be on the outside looking in. Unless you believe you belong. Right now, there are 8.25 billion people on planet Earth, and the one you worship died for all of them. They just don't know it. In order to feel part of that family that is sung about, that is talked about, that anthems are written about, you have to have that God-given grace within that says, I believe. But, like always, I like to create some kind of an anecdotal reference point before we launch into the message. Right now, we're going through skirmish in the Middle East. Many of you have read about it. Some of you still read papers. They're big pieces that have writing on them. If you can't find it, you can go to a library. A library is a building, by the way, that you enter that has books. I'm just giving you a reference point. Someone asked me, he says, do you have a social media handle? I said, no, I got off Instagram and went back to Billy Graham. I'm old school that way, so I don't have a social media handle. I got off Faceless Book because everybody on there is hiding behind their real face and none of them have read a book. And let's not even talk about X. It's 140 characters of stupidity or less. But that's just my take on social media. With due apologies to the pastor from Australia, I do carry an iPad, and the reason is someone asked me one time, are you a Bible thumper? I said, no, it hurts my iPad. So I'm scrolling my way to grace. When you look at this concept of what's going on in the Middle East, I'm reminded of a story that is told of many, many centuries ago when the Pope decided that Italy would get rid of everybody of Jewish heritage and it would stay a Catholic nation. And they decided that they were going to invite someone who was illustrious enough to represent the Hebraic community, to represent them as to why the Jews were going to be allowed to stay in Italy. So on the day of the debate, they had a problem. See, the Pope did not speak Yiddish, and the Hebrew scholar did not speak Italian. So they decided that they would go into a debate using sign language. The Pope stood up and simply put 3 fingers in the air. The Hebrew scholar just raised one. The Pope then waved his hand, and the Hebrew scholar pointed to the ground. At which point the Pope took out the elements for Holy Communion, the sacrament, and the Hebrew scholar took out an apple. And the Pope stood up and said, I have been bested. This man has beat me in everything I have raised. I'm going to go back and let the Jews stay here forever. Now, a couple of days go by, one of the cardinals goes up to the Pope and says, Your Eminence, what was that all about? He said, well, I raised 3 fingers to talk about the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And he says, yes, but there is only one God, Jehovah. I then said, Italy will be rid of the Jews. And he says, we're staying right here. And then I took out the elements to talk about the absolution of sin. And he took out an apple to show me original sin. I knew he knew his words better than I did. A couple of weeks go by, and one of the ladies walks up to the Hebrew scholar and says, what happened? He says, I don't know. He put 3 fingers up in the air. And he was telling me that you have 3 days to leave Italy. I said, even if you just give me 1 day, we're not going. Then he says, there will be no Jews in all of Italy. I said, we're staying right here. So what happened then? He says, I don't know. He took out his lunch, so I took out mine. So sometimes you have to believe you belong. And sometimes it's not complicated. I'm old-fashioned. I've shared this with you guys many times. I believe the Bible from Genesis to maps. I know some of you are erudite and sophisticated and very scholarly in your discipleship, that you think it ends with Revelation. But if you look at the problems in the world today, they're all about the maps. Something I've been clamoring since the beginning of time. A small piece of land surrounded by a sea of hostility. America may perish, India may perish, and we may change our names, but Israel cannot, will not, and shall not perish. A chosen race one after God's own heart. So as we navigate through today, my scripture for you is simply from Proverbs. We're going to talk about this concept of belonging. But it goes to Proverbs 16:1. The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from God. The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer is from God. You know, on December 3rd, 1967, the world experienced something very remarkable. It was the first human heart transplant. A grocer, who has a long Polish name, Waszewski or something, was the recipient. A 22-year-old lady was the donor. Christian Bernard was the man who performed that remarkable surgery in Cape Town, South Africa. Now, I want you to look at the backdrop of a heart transplant in a nation steeped in darkness. The categorization of the people were simple. Blacks, the Bantus, were one category. Whites, the Dutch and the English origin and their derivatives were another. And then there was colored. Years later, they allowed the Indians and the Pakistanis to call themselves Asians, but at one time, our Indian people were also called colored. I've been to Durban a couple of times, which is the largest diaspora of Indian people outside of India in any one city, where 82% are Indian. Now, the reason I share that story is 1967, these people were not allowed to use the same restrooms, had to carry papers to cross a street, had to have a special pass to go to a secluded beach up. So get this, Indians of Indian origin were not allowed to swim in the Indian Ocean. That was the backdrop where the first human heart transplant took place. In a world where the heart was basically without any hope. This heart, when you look at that proverb, this heart, if it is thought of as a circulatory muscle, it will pump blood. It will give you the life-sustaining oxygen as it cleanses that blood. It will allow your pulse to beat, your heart to reverberate, your steps to take, your hands to wave, your tongue to speak, all because it's a muscle there. But it will die the death of 1,000 qualifications if it doesn't do the one thing it was created for, the belonging to the concept of adoration. Adoration for the one who created us all, who gave each one of us a heart just of love for him. See, I've been married 37 years now. It's been the best 18 years of her life. For the first few, I had all the answers. They were wrong. People always ask me, when you got married, how did you guys reconcile? You're that stubborn South Indian kid, and she's that sweet North Indian Christian family, educated. I came from a family that I think invented copper because we found a penny. I was poor. We were on the wrong side of the tracks. We didn't have tracks to be on the wrong side of. I jokingly tell people, we used to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken, lick other people's fingers. There's poor and there's poor. We was poor. But I used to tell my wife, I said, sweetheart, our marriage is going to be simple. Communication is going to be paramount. I'm a man. If we're going to belong in this family, I'm going to make all the big decisions. You can make the small ones. I know there's a verbal gasp right now in the audience that a man of my stature would make such a sexist statement. I did. And somehow the marriage has lasted 37 years because I'm here to report that in 37 years we have not had a big decision. Somehow she's managed to present the purchase of a house as a small thing. And when I talk about this, I want you to see the human heart was designed that way. We are designed to love each other not by looking at each other in a transactional way. We're supposed to love each other through Him. And through Him, we see forgiveness, redemption, complete, absolved. Who are we to find fault with each other? That's why one of the things we do, and we do badly, Christians are a really weird species. And I tell this because I found out through my own research, we're the only ones who crucify our living, worship our dead, and then look for survivors to shoot. Every church I've been to has had some issue with somebody because the concept of worship is different. Archbishop William Temple put it this way: worship is the submission of all of our nature to God. It is the quickening of our conscience to His holiness, the opening of our mind to His truth, the purifying of our imagination to His beauty, the opening of our heart to His love, the submission of our will to His purpose. All this gathered up in adoration, the most selfless emotion of which we were created. Do you realize adoration should come naturally? We should be able to like things naturally. Now, women are more gifted than men in the ability to love. Man will walk into a room and will run out of words within about 3 things to add. What do you like about this place? Lights are good. You bring a woman in here, she'll love everything from the carpet to the sequencing of someone's earrings matching someone else's car. That's why when she asked for green shoes, I knew that's not a stretch. When she asked for mismatching socks, it was a gal. We are just wired together differently. Our communication patterns are different. But I want you to anchor on this concept of belonging. First, let's understand we were created with differences, but unified in praise. Men and women are different. I've traveled all over the world. I've been out to dinner thousands of times with multitudes of people. Now, I don't know what it is about you women. One of you needs to go to the restroom. Will stand up, nod her head, and collect a crowd. If a dude ever stands up at a table and says, Krish, why don't you and Alan go with me to the restroom? I ain't going. There's trouble written all over that. But we refuse to acknowledge the difference. I grew up in a generation where it was cool to put Wonder Woman's poster in your room if you were a teenager. Now our teenagers are wondering what a woman is. We are messing up basic biology because we think common sense can be rewritten. But when you look at the scripture, what does it say about the heart? It says the plans of the heart belong to man. You can do whatever you want with how you think and bleed and make this work. But it cannot work unless you realize that the answer of the tongue, that's why you're supposed to think before you speak, which as a married man, I don't do very often. I'm an efficiency expert. I train corporations. I've trained everybody from AT&T to Walmart. That's why when I hear people read my resume, I want them to stop because they're saying all these nice things about you and you think you're at your funeral. But I remember once early in my career, I walked up to my bride and I said, I noticed you're taking about 7 or 8 unnecessary steps in the preparation of breakfast. You know, talking like an assembly line chain management expert. She looked at me and she says, I think you're right. And we solved the problem. I now make my own breakfast. This is what I want you to do is when you go through this conference and you hear different ideas about believing, about belonging, about becoming, don't look at it through the lens of faith if you subscribe to something else. Don't look at it through the invitation of becoming unequivocally of a follower of the carpenter from Galilee if you've not yet made that decision. Look at it through the basic premise of what we call Occam's razor. What is the easiest outcome for something to be true? What is the easiest outcome to believe? What is the easiest outcome with the least number of possibilities of permutations and combinations for you to belong? You know, I'm reminded, one of the stories we tell on Easter is the thief on the cross and how much time he had. But I've always wondered, when the thief of the cross went to heaven, who let him in? Jesus was still on earth. Peter was still here denying, not to make scholars, to a little girl. And they asked the thief, on what authority do you enter heaven? He says, the dude in the middle said, today. Now, that's not King James Version, that's Dhanam version. And it's from an iPad, it's not from a Bible. because I don't go around calling him dude. But think about it. Did you ever tithe? No, I took. What denomination were you, robber? Did you go to church? Only after everybody left. What did you study how to take? On what authority do you think you can enter the gates of heaven? The man in the middle said today. This weekend is someone's today. This moment is someone's today. As you're standing on the gates looking, asking yourself, do I belong? Can I keep up? You know, I'm surprised. I've been coming here many, many times. Someone asked me how many times I've spoken here. I've forgotten. But one thing that has really puzzled me is Brother Allen. I'm thinking, man, his team, no, Alan's aged. He just keeps getting younger people on stage every time I come back because he's not dancing anymore like he used to 10 years ago, but he's got young people pumping up and down. One thing that hasn't changed is the echo of his heart, the reverberation of his spirit, the anxiousness of his faith, the absolute giving of his talent. God does not need you. He wants you. That's humbling. Why would the creator of the universe need any of you? He created it all. But in wanting you, that is the least number of possibilities. There is nothing you can do that is good enough that will get you to him. There is nothing you can do that is bad enough that will keep you from him. Because as the God of the universe, he said, I will stand in the gap and let anybody challenge me. I will stay in that gap till you cross. That is love. An unconditional love, not a transactional love. In one seminar, a guy asked me, how often should I tell my wife I love her? I said, before somebody else does. It's not complicated. Let's look at the 4 moods. First, again, breaking it down, the plans of the heart. This is the growing tune. We are living in a world where what is coming as seeming melody is an innocuous deception of a tune. It is almost akin to the old fable of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, which many of us read as a child. A gifted talent to eradicate the plagues in the city of one of the smaller towns in Germany. That's how the fable went. Because there was an overrunning of the rodent species, the Pied Piper would come. And the Pied Piper would be paid a fee to play a tune, to lilt the rats out of their hibernation and follow him into the river. But if they refused to pay, he would play a different tune. And that tune would attract your children. And your children would follow. So much so that the word, the Pied Piper, became a cult classic word. Be careful lest the Pied Piper come calling. We are now living in a debauched, derelict, desperate, despondent society that has fallen a death of 1,000 qualifications because our children are marching to the tune of a Pied Piper, leading them straight to the gates of hell. And that's hard because we are raising them with the anthems of the ages. But the tune out there, and unfortunately the church, is not standing guard. In the West where I come from, it's almost a bygone conclusion that the churches are deeply divided on these issues. But I always tell them this, our tunes could be any, our anthems could be any, but the voice that has to come is the voice of God. Otherwise, this heart is broken, it's decrepit, it's corrupt, and it's stained. Not only can it not love, it is incapable of love. This is why C.S. Lewis, when he talks about his 4 great loves, says, there is a love in storge, which is a relational love that can be given by a mother. There is a phileo, which is a love that can be given by a brother. There is eros, which is physical, which would be given to one another. But there is only one love that is agape that comes from the Father. And that unconditional love is what unites the other loves. And if you do not have that unconditional love and you do not belong to that unconditional love, you're incapable of any of these others because it becomes transactional. What have you done for me lately? I grew up in this society, and this is a give and take society like none other. My mother went to her grave with that mindset that if you do something for someone, it is because something else will come back to you. And if you do anything for yourself, even though it is the will of God in your life, somehow you're blaspheming something. I remember when I wrote my first book, and I called her. I said, Amma, I just wrote my first book. She said, don't tell anybody, you'll have bad luck. I was thinking to myself, I don't know who gave you a degree, but if you write a book, you tell everybody. If you read a lousy book, you don't tell anybody. But that's what my mother, was she wrong? No, she was innocent and naive. And many of us look at the gospel with that innocence which is needed, but not with the naivete that is not needed. The logic of this faith is not blind. The logic of this faith is not tradition. In fact, hear me carefully. Some of you are generational believers. If tradition is your only strategy, your familial culture will become your only formula. You cannot get out of your own shadow. That's why William Blake, the poet, put it this way: this eye's dim windows of the soul distorts our heavens from pole to pole and goads us to believe a lie when we see with and not through the eye. We're supposed to see through the eye with a conscience. And when you look at that first part, it simply says, the plan of the heart. What is the growing tune? This afternoon, one of the gentlemen asked me the question, how do I tell my son that wanting all the things that other people have is an unnatural appetite? You know, we have children now. If you ask them what you want to do, I want to be a billionaire. Nobody wants to be a millionaire anymore. They just went straight for $1 billion. In fact, there's one story making the round, some of you may have seen this, about a teacher who asked a kid, his name is Vaibhav, they asked the kid, Vaibhav, what is your goal? Oh, I want to be a billionaire. I want to own 20 companies. I want to have 25 bank accounts. I want to have 7 cars. I want to have homes in 5 countries. And the teacher said, I was not looking for an essay. I was just looking for an answer as to what you want to be. Then he asked the girl sitting next to her, Geeta, what do you want to be? She said, Vaibhav's wife. So it narrows down. Want is still want, greed is still greed. But when I met Mother Teresa and I asked her the question, how much? The tune of the heart. She says, no matter how much you get, it'll never be enough unless you know the one who is enough. No matter how much you get, it'll never be enough unless you know the one who is enough. The second, the plans of the heart belong to man. This is the lyrics. We create our own lyrics. The story is told of a guy who was performing at a symphony. He had now reached the zenith of his profession, the apex of his career, a young prodigy, a maestro on all levels. As he played note after masterful note on that violin, the crowd was mesmerized that so much classical musical talent was available in one little body and on display for the world to consume. And as he played and he played, the crowd's crescendo of applause reverberated in that auditorium, and you could begin to hear it in the neighboring street. And then the time came when he was finished. And as he was finished, he stood up, and the crowd erupted into a cheer of an encore. But he tried to find the back gaps of the panel so he could slink behind, because he didn't want to play anymore. And when he got backstage, the handler pushed him out, said, are you nuts? This is what people do this for. The limelight is finally on you. The audience's approval is upon you. Society is now waiting for you. Rewards await you. And the boy looked and said, look at seat number 2 on row number 3. There's one person not standing. He's not even clapping. That's my teacher. Whose applause matters? Are we dancing? People always ask me, what happens to you when people say not bad things about you? Nothing. See, I have never believed my positive press, so I never have to defend my negative press. If you respond to the feeble accolades of this frivolous world, you will dance to its tune and create your own anthem. This is when you feel that you are so full of the Spirit that you actually have the gall to stand in front of the mirror and sing, "How great thou art." I don't know where that joke was born. It died right here. Don't stand in front of the mirror and sing, "How great thou art." That's blasphemy. The third mood I want to present for you is the answer of the tongue. This is the blowing song. See, when art imitates life, it is creative and considered a wonderful expression. When life imitates art, the boundaries become brittle. When life is replaced with art, then man becomes God. We are now living. Someone asked, I love that question that was asked by the pastors, the Secunderabad pastors, when they said, "How many of you do not belong to hope?" The better way I would have phrased that, because I've been here so many times, I would simply say, "How many of you are hopeless?" it just has a better anthem to it. But that's not far cry from the truth. In this room, this auditorium right now, and this is a serious side. If I'm looking over a crowd that is packed row to row, I'm venturing to guess, without any fear of error, that there are 25% of you right now struggling with deep doubt, battling an inner voice that is saying, "You're not worthy," dealing with demons of someone who committed an atrocity on you 5, 7, 10 years ago. Someone you trusted ruined the innocence of your childhood. And you're standing there lonely, helpless. Someone said, "Come." The voices in this room are elevating. The chorus in this room is uplifting. The lyrics in this room are soul-stirring. Hopefully the message is captivating, but when you get into the car, that loneliness will hit. What now? What else? Me, myself, and I. And the reason I'm saying that is, that's where you have to realize that no matter what this world throws at you, good, bad, or indifferent, there is only one who can stand in the gap and say, "Have you been abandoned? Do you want someone who was abandoned? Father, if this cup is mine, give it to me. Otherwise, please take it from me." Have you ever been betrayed? Oh, Judas. Have you ever been denied? Peter. Did Mary know that 24 hours later she would be cradling the corpse of her son? Did John know that 24 hours later he would be anointing the body of his slain hero? Did Pilate know that 24 hours later he would forever be credited with being the architect of the Messiah's death? No. And none of you know what 24 hours hold. Karl Barth said, none of us can go back and make a brand new beginning, but all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending. But don't wait till the very end. If there's a confession to be made, it is right to do it right now. When I'm finished, the pastors will come and give you that opportunity. As an itinerant who travels the globe, I always want people to find a home. They may be motivated by the words of someone who flows in and out like a song, but they need to be connected with someone who is a pillar and has there and will be there for a long time to come. As we begin to get to this last mood, remember, the glowing melody is from the Lord. The growing melody is from the Lord. I was lost in my own journey, belonging to nothing, aspiring for everything. I was in a lot of deals. I ran away to the West to make fame and fortune. And I ran after money. I made some, I lost more than I made. And most of the days I was despondent. I'll never forget it. One day we were in a grocery store. Back then grocery stores didn't take credit cards. Yes, there used to be a world where there was no credit cards. If you're wondering what that world was like, just Google it. There are a few YouTube clips. We're not all so old that we remember when the Dead Sea was just sick. That was just the 90s, okay? So don't get on a... But I was standing in the grocery store line and we had $14 to our name. And I wanted to buy a store-bought pizza. I was adamant. And my bride looked at me and said, sweetheart, maybe with the money we have, we just get some staples like bread and eggs. I said, no, I want a pizza. She said, fine. When we got up to the counter, in a whisper you could have heard 3 blocks away, the clerk said, they don't have any money. We need a price check on lane 3. A $5.99 pizza I couldn't buy for that woman who gave up everything to follow me to the ends of the earth. As I sat on the sidewalk in Dallas, Texas, on a brutal Sunday afternoon, weeping big, manly tears of disappointment, my life had come to that crossroads. I looked at her and said, what kind of a man am I? I can't even buy you a pizza. I love her innocence in her response that kept my fire lit then and keeps my bell ringing now. She simply said, she said, sweetheart, if I wanted to marry if I wanted a pizza, I would have married the first guy my dad pointed me to because my dad would have been smart enough to check out their bank account. But in you, I saw a man who was devoted to his wife, was disciplined to his God, would take every lick lying down and wake up every morning to try again. And she gave me the words that I have then ushered around the world. She said, sweetheart, failure is just an event. It has never been a person. You can fail at something. You cannot fail as someone. The God you trust loves you too much. And that was the day I dusted myself off and I realized the difference between wealth and riches. Riches are when your best friend wants to hang out with you. Wealth is when the God of the universe says, there's nothing you can give me that I don't already have. I want you to be wise and lively. I'll close with a real quick illustration. Some years went by and we were in Oklahoma in Tulsa. And Colin Powell at that time, retired now as the Minister of State and Home for the United States State Department, the 4th highest in rank. As I was walking into the seminar hall, his Secret Service came up to me and said, Mr. Powell, the general would like to speak to Mr. Dhanam. And as I was walking away from my wife, it was our anniversary. We walked past General Powell's green room and General Powell looked at her and said, I hear it's your anniversary. And she said, yes. She was shocked that the general would know. He says, you mind if I kiss your cheek? I'm an old-fashioned diplomat, as I would like to wish you. So he kissed my bride on the cheek and said, I need to borrow your husband for about 15 minutes to talk about something I'm troubled about. And we went in and he wanted to know about some of the issues of the world because I travel. The former Secretary of State of the United States was looking at this lowly immigrant who had gone to America with $9 in his pocket to talk international diplomacy. When I came out, I found my bride now sitting on the side crying, big tears, with her dad on the other side. She says, Dad, I told you he belongs to us. God had his hand on this boy long before our family said yes. We could not have made a better choice, Dad. Your son-in-law was just talking to the Secretary of State of the United States. The reason I share both stories is wherever you are on the gap of life, wherever you are on the continuum of hope, wherever you are in this cycle, the seesaw of despondence, remember the anthem of that proverb. The voices you hear from your heart will not matter unless the spoken word is revealed from Him. With this, I want to simply give you this plea. If today there's anybody who feels that soul-stirring search in your heart saying, I love your simplicity and not the complexity. I love the fact that you just talk about life and showed me a slice of yours. I want to belong. I want to belong so that the next 3 days I can both believe and become. When they give the invitation and they start playing the final songs, make sure you make that decision. Because one thing I can promise you, you can leave here hopeless. You can leave here despondent. You can leave here doubtful. You can leave here angry. But if you leave with Him, you'll never be lonely. God bless.